The air grew thick with a familiar tension as Ethan prepared to depart, again. For Tiffany, my heart, which had weathered this storm one too many times, finally splintered. I drew a sharp breath and delivered the verdict I could no longer withhold. If you walk out that door to her today, we are done. He did not pause, he did not look back. The certainty in his step carved a hollow space inside me. And in that void, I understood true despair. Tiffany was not merely a friend. She was the impenetrable wall between us. A truth we both acknowledged but never dismantled. This dance had begun not long after we started dating. Back in our first golden semester of college, Ethan had swept into my life like a sudden burst of sun. All charm and easy laughter. He claimed it was love at first sight for me. It was inevitability. We became us swiftly, effortlessly, and in almost every regard. He was the ideal partner, attentive, warm, devoted until Tiffany called. Then I faded into the background. Months later, when he found me laughing beside an old friend under the soft glow of cafe lights, his face tightened with something raw and unbridled. "What is this?" he demanded, voice edged with possession. I offered a faint, cool smile. "You go to your childhood friend," I said softly, "and I'll go to mine. Seems only fair, doesn't it?" He never forgot any anniversary, big or small, always having various small gifts or surprises after we moved in together. Post-graduation, he took over all the household chores, cooking, washing dishes, mopping. He wouldn't let me do anything, saying he was afraid I'd get tired. I once teased him, laughing, saying he was so good to me he'd turn me into a useless person. He chuckled, tapped my nose and replied, "If you're useless, you won't be able to find anyone else. You'll belong to me forever." I remember how happy I was, hugging him tightly. Then I felt so fortunate to have someone love and cherish me like that. It wasn't until Tiffany appeared that I realized my happiness was nothing more than an illusion. 3. I knew he had a childhood friend who was a girl, but I didn't realize his feelings for her went beyond friendship. I recall the first time he introduced me to his friends. They seemed slightly stunned when they saw me. It was only after Ethan cleared his throat that they snapped out of it and got up to greet me. I later asked Ethan why his friends had reacted that way. He just chuckled and teased, "It's just because you're too beautiful." His joke made me blush, and I didn't think anything more of it. It wasn't until Tiffany returned from Europe recently, and I accompanied Ethan and his friends to her welcome party, that I understood why they had been so surprised. The first time we met, it turned out I bore a striking resemblance to Tiffany, especially my eyes. I suddenly remembered asking Ethan what he liked most about me when we first got together. He had smiled and told me it was my eyes, saying my gaze was bright and clear, and looking into them made his heart inexplicably race. Even I, as oblivious as I could be, could sense the undeniable tension and complicated intimacy between him and Tiffany at that moment. Yet, I still tried to reassure myself that everyone has a past and there was no need to dwell on old relationships. Still, deep down, I couldn't help but feel a little bothered. It seemed everyone at the party was in high spirits, except me. After a few rounds of drinks, someone started to joke Tiffany was our goddess. Back then, so many guys had crushes on her openly and secretly tell me about it, but she only ever got close to Ethan. I was so jealous back then. Yeah, we all thought they'd end up together. Who would have thought? Hearing that, my heart sank uncontrollably. I instinctively turned to look at Ethan beside me, but he just kept his head down, quietly peeling shrimp, not saying a word. Perhaps sensing my gaze, he turned his head, then placed all the peeled shrimp into my bowl. He smiled and said, "Impatient, are we?" Eat slowly. His actions and words were just as before, but his voice trembled slightly as he spoke, his smile forced, and his gaze held a hint of pleading under his watchful eye. I picked up a shrimp and took a bite. He visibly relaxed with a sigh of relief, but I couldn't feel happy at all. He knew perfectly well that I was allergic to seafood, not severely, but it would cause a rash. Yet he still handed me the shrimp. I figured it was probably because Tiffany loved them. Sure enough, the next second, Tiffany's voice rang out, "See, once you get a girlfriend, you forget about your friends. You used to peel all my shrimp for me, but since you do on your girlfriend so much, I'll be generous and forgive you." Tiffany's words were light-hearted, but the look she gave me was anything but friendly. Anyone who wasn't a fool could detect the hostility in her voice, but unfortunately, the person sitting next to me was indeed a fool. Ethan laughed it off, playfully scolding her for a moment before casually chatting about old times with everyone. In that instant, I suddenly felt like an intruder who had wandered into someone else's territory evicted the moment. Tiffany, for that day I couldn't help but lose my temper with Ethan. I asked him why he forced me to eat shrimp when he knew I was allergic. He sighed and pulled me into a hug. I knew you'd misunderstand. Please just listen to me, okay? Tiffany and I did have a period where we liked each other, but it was cut short before it could truly blossom. She went to Europe to study, and then I met you. She contacted me before coming back this time, and it sounded like she still had feelings for me. I deliberately put on that act to make her give up hope. Of course, I remember you're allergic to shrimp, but it's not a severe allergy, is it? To prevent her from affecting our relationship, I had no choice but to put you in an uncomfortable position. Grace, please trust me, okay? Perhaps women in love truly have their heads filled with nonsense. After his seemingly earnest explanation, I actually accepted his excuse, but I still asked the question that made my heart feel so uneasy. Did you choose me because I look like her? Ethan's body stiffened slightly at my question. After a moment of silence, he finally sighed and said, I don't want to lie to you. At first, that was indeed a reason, but as we've spent time together, I've realized you two are completely different people. I admit that our initial connection had something to do with her, but we've been together for so long now, I wouldn't commit my whole life just because of a slight resemblance, would I? We're going to get married, I'm sure. Now I love you, not her. My heart was on an emotional roller coaster, rising and falling, before finally settling back into place. I thought he was right. So many years of a relationship couldn't be sustained just because of a slight resemblance. He must truly love me. Afterward, his gatherings with friends became noticeably more frequent. After going a few times, I found them boring and stopped attending. Ethan, for his part, was very upfront. He would always tell me before he went and informed me that Tiffany would be there, offering not to go if I minded. I thought that since he was so honest, I shouldn't interfere with his social life just because of my petty emotions. But how could I forget? There's a saying, the more one tries to cover up, the more exposed one becomes. If was truly afraid I'd misunderstand or overthink things, he could have easily cut off contact with Tiffany. That would have been the simplest, most permanent solution, but he didn't. What's more, to my surprise, at some point Ethan's friend gatherings began to turn into one-on-one dates with Tiffany. That day I had planned a dinner with some colleagues. Ethan also happened to have plans with his friends. It was an uncanny coincidence that our chosen restaurants were the same. Just as I reached the entrance, I saw Ethan's car parked outside. I was inwardly marveling at the strange twist of fate. When I turned my key and through the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows saw Ethan and Tiffany sitting inside. They were laughing and chatting, completely oblivious to anyone else, and the scene was incredibly jarring. In that instant, I froze. My mind was instantly flooded with all sorts of thoughts. What were they talking about? How long had they been meeting alone like this? Had been lying to me all along? What exactly was happening right now? Perhaps he felt my gaze because Ethan turned his head mid-con conversation the moment he saw me. His smile froze. Tiffany noticed his reaction and looked over too. When she saw me standing outside the window, her eyebrows suddenly arched and a mocking smile played on her lips. I quickly said goodbye to my colleagues and turned to leave. I was so upset and on the verge of tears. I didn't want anyone, especially Tiffany, to see me in such a humiliating state, but I was a step too late. Ethan rushed out and grabbed my hand. Grace, please let me explain. Things aren't what you think. I struggled desperately to pull my hand away from Ethan, but his grip was too strong. I couldn't break free. I fought to suppress the bitterness in my heart, trying to keep my emotions steady, but my voice still trembled uncontrollably. All right, then tell me. Ethan took a deep breath and slowly began to speak. I didn't lie to you. We were supposed to meet with others today, but they suddenly had something come up and couldn't make it. Tiffany has wanted to come to this place for a long time. She made reservations ages ago, and I didn't want to disappoint her. Grace, please trust me, okay? Tiffany, who had appeared behind Ethan at some point, also spoke up. That's right, Grace, Ethan isn't lying to you. A few others really did cancel at the last minute. Why don't I call them, and you can confirm it? She pulled out her phone from her purse, making a move to dial, but I reached out and stopped her. Forget it, I heard my own reply. The truth no longer mattered. What mattered was that my trust in Ethan had already begun to crumble. 6 on the way home, Ethan continued to explain. Tirelessly, he said Tiffany hadn't been back to the States in a long time and wasn't familiar with anything, which was why she kept asking him for help. He said they grew up together and he couldn't bear to see her looking so pathetic and alone. He asked me to be understanding, claiming that I had my parents and many friends here, while Tiffany only had him. As if realizing he'd said too much, he suddenly fell silent. Meeting his gaze, I burst out laughing. So this isn't the first time you've met alone, is it? Ethan was silent. His silence was the clearest answer. After a long pause, Ethan finally spoke. I'm sorry, Grace. I was afraid you'd misunderstand, so I didn't tell you the truth, but nothing is really going on between us. I've only seen her alone a few times. Grace, please, will you trust me one more time? I didn't know how to describe how I felt. Then absurd, ridiculous, and utterly helpless, because even after all this, I realized I still couldn't let go of Ethan. I slowly nodded, thinking that 3 strikes and you're out. I would give him one last chance. Snapping back from my memories, I felt pathetic and miserable. This situation today was a result of my reluctance to let go and my constant indulgence. I deserved it. I drank a lot of alcohol, and in my hazy state, a sharp pain suddenly shot through my lower. I thought I could just tough it out, but the pain intensified. Instinctively, I called Ethan, but he didn't pick up. When I called again, his phone was off. I laughed, tears streaming down my face. He probably thought I was just calling to make a fuss. After all, he'd already told me that Tiffany had encountered some thugs on her way home from work today and was terrified. He needed to rush over to comfort his traumatized childhood friend. In the end, I called 911. Sure enough, he would never be the one I could rely on in a crisis. By the time Ethan rushed to the hospital, my surgery was already complete. It was acute appendicitis any later, and it might have cost me my life. Seeing him approach Zoe, who was sitting by my bed, feeding me water, let out a dissatisfied scoff. Then, very reluctantly, she stood up and moved away from the spot. Before leaving, she glared at Ethan and fiercely warned him that if he dared to upset me again, she'd make him pay. I chuckled faintly, signaling Zoe that I was fine. Only then did Zoe finally leave, glancing back repeatedly. The moment Zoe left, Ethan immediately clasped my hand. His face and eyes were filled with guilt and unease. Before he even spoke, his eyes welled up. It was the first time I'd seen him like that since I'd known him. He took several breaths to compose himself before finally managing a full sentence. Grace, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I smiled and shook my head. It's okay. It's not your fault, and I'm fine now. Aren't I? My understanding only deepened the guilt on his face. He squeezed my hand tightly, seemingly wanting to say something but unable to. Finally, as if making a firm resolution, he declared to me, Grace, I won't see Tiffany anymore after this. After hearing Ethan's words, I smiled and shook my head, saying softly, It's okay, Ethan. I trust you too. Ethan didn't say anything, but his expression clearly told me he would prove everything to me through his actions. You see, he actually understood everything. It was just that he chose to turn a blind eye before because he hadn't suffered any consequences. But it's too late, Ethan. You didn't seize the chances I gave you. You've shattered my fantasies about the future and my yearning for love. Little by little, how could I let you off easy? Now it's my turn to build you a dream and then shatter it with my own hands. 7 Perhaps people are naturally predisposed to self-sabotage. Ethan, who previously lied to me just to see Tiffany, was now determined to prove to me that he had absolutely nothing to do with her. This was already Tiffany's 20th call to him. He thought I knew nothing, but his slightly flustered expression betrayed him. I smiled, pointed at the phone, and said softly, She's called you so many times. It must be something important. Go ahead and answer. It's fine. Ethan looked up at me, and after confirming there was no anger on my face, he finally answered the call. The moment he picked up, Tiffany's tearful voice came through. Ethan, I just found a mouse in my house. I'm so scared. Please come quickly. Ethan cautiously glanced at me again, then, as if seeking approval, immediately rejected. Tiffany, I need to take care of Grace. Try, and the others. If they're all busy, then contact building management. Without waiting for Tiffany's reply, Ethan decisively hung up the phone. He then took my hand, a fawning look on his face. Grace, I really will cut ties with her from now on. Please don't leave me, okay? His question amused me, and I laughed. I asked him why he would think that. Why he suddenly thought I wanted to break up. He hesitated for a long time before Finally speaking, Grace, don't you love me anymore? I've been thinking these past few days if I had been there that night, if I had answered your call. Maybe you wouldn't have gone through such a dangerous situation. I'm so scared if you hadn't called 911. In time, would you have? Just before he could finish, Ethan actually started crying. He buried his face in his hands, weeping openly in front of me for the first time, apologizing repeatedly, looking utterly regretful. I just found it amusing to watch. Yes, if I hadn't known he was unreliable and called 911 in time, he might be crying over my corpse right now, and wouldn't that have been a waste? But I couldn't say that I could only suppress my discomfort and embrace him pretending to be magnanimous. It's okay, Ethan, it's all in the past. I know you didn't mean to. It was just an accident, and we have many tomorrows to live, don't we? Painting a rosy picture, anyone can do that. Sure enough, after hearing my words, Ethan stopped crying. He held me tightly as if I would disappear if he let go for a while. After that, he worked and came home on schedule every day, pushing off any social engagements he could and spending almost all his free time with me, probably to make up for his guilt. He cooked me various delicious meals every day and showered me with clothes, bags, and other gifts. For a moment, it felt like we were back in the honeymoon phase. I accepted everything with a smile, then posted it all on my social media, not forgetting to add cheesy captions and happy emojis, because I knew the happier and more content I appeared, the more restless certain people would become. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Tiffany proactively asked to meet me. When I saw her message, I couldn't stop the surge of joy. I had been waiting for this day for a long time. Tiffany set the meeting location at the same restaurant where I had accidentally seen her and Ethan on a date. I knew she was doing it on purpose, probably thinking I'd be upset by the memories. No problem, if she wants a show, I'll generously play along. I deliberately arrived a little late to our agreed time. Before I even entered, I saw Tiffany looking annoyed, constantly checking her phone, probably thinking I was going to stand. I composed myself, putting on a distressed expression as I walked up to her. After I sat down, I greeted her with a strange smile. Traffic was bad on the way. Sorry. Seeing my reaction, Tiffany sneered and said, really? I thought you were scared and wouldn't dare to show up. Were you wondering all the way here if you'd see Ethan and me? You know, having a great time again. TSK, just as I expected. I knew she meant trouble. I lowered my head and said nothing more, looking like someone whose thoughts had been exposed. Seeing this, Tiffany smiled even wider, her voice practically dripping with disdain. Looks like you have some self-awareness as a substitute. You should step aside gracefully when the real owner returns. Understand? Save yourself some dignity. Don't end up losing face in the battle. It took all my strength to resist rolling my eyes. I truly couldn't understand how someone could be so shameless and self-righteous. Why did she think Ethan would wait for her in the same spot for so long? But I quickly realized that her competence came from Ethan. It was Ethan who had repeatedly lied to me for her, the result of Ethan choosing her over and over again. In the end, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh, then raised my head to meet her eyes. Who knows who will truly lose face in the battle in the end? Ethan isn't talking to you anymore, is he? He proactively told me he wants to cut ties with you. I even said it was fine, but he's insisting. I watched Tiffany's face before me shift from smugness to anger, and I felt increasingly satisfied. What does the past matter? What matters most are the choices made now. Isn't that right? I deliberately raised my hand to brush my hair, and the large diamond ring on my ring finger sparkled. If you really like Ethan, you'd better act fast, otherwise you might just be drinking at our wedding reception. 9. Yes, Ethan proposed to me yesterday. I deliberately hadn't posted about it on social media, waiting to give Tiffany a surprise when she eventually came looking for me. I didn't expect her to be so cooperative. The engagement ring wasn't even warm on my finger yet, and she was already trying to assert her dominance. I really wanted to see what Tiffany would do once she knew Ethan was going to marry me, but the period that followed was unexpectedly calm, so calm that I even wondered if Tiffany had suddenly been possessed, or why else she wouldn't make a move. Ethan, on the other hand, was eagerly planning our wedding every day, from the decor style of our new home to the choice of honeymoon location, from where to take our wedding photos to which hotel to book, how many tables and how many guests to invite. He was enthusiastically arranging every single detail. He held my hand constantly, planning our future with me. Grace, look, should we make this room the kids' room? I've already thought it through. After we get married, we'll have 2 children, preferably a boy first and then a girl. That way, the older brother can protect his little sister and no one will dare bully her. And here on the balcony, we'll put a big hanging chair. You've always loved hanging chairs, haven't you? Then you can sit here and scroll on your phone or read when your eyes get tired. You can just look out at the scenery. Oh, for our honeymoon, where would you like to go? There are so many fun places, I don't even know where to choose. How about Hawaii or the Florida? I promised to take you there for ages, but we never made it. And about the wedding photos, what style do you like? I've been so overwhelmed looking through options recently. I really don't know how to decide. He rambled on and on, repeating himself, seemingly truly looking forward to this wedding. After searching for a long time, he finally settled on a location for our wedding photos, a small studio, supposedly known for its high quality work. On the day of the photo shoot, he seemed a bit restless. I guess Tiffany had finally run out of patience and was about to make her big move. I pretended not to notice his constantly lighting up phone, focusing instead on discussing my desired photo style with the photographer. By the time I came out, after changing, Ethan finally couldn't hold back anymore. Grace, the photos might not happen. Something unexpected came up with Tiffany. I looked up at Ethan, seeing his panicked expression, pale lips and slightly accelerated breathing. So I too grew serious and asked him what happened. Addition. Ethan's voice trembled uncontrollably. Tiffany, she cut her wrists. 10. I watched Ethan's frantic exit, my heart completely undisturbed. In contrast, the makeup artist and photographer beside me both cast sympathetic glances my way. Yes, being abandoned during a wedding photo shoot certainly sounded a bit pathetic. My situation was probably a first in their careers, but truthfully, it didn't matter. I hadn't wanted to take them anyway. Lying in bed at home, I was still thinking about how ruthless Tiffany was to herself, acting like her life depended on a man. TSK truly terrifying. Ethan didn't come home that night. He just sent me a message saying he was at the hospital. I wasn't surprised by this outcome. After all, Tiffany had gone to such extremes with this act. If it still couldn't keep Ethan, she would have truly lost out. The next day, when Ethan returned, his face was very poor. I didn't know if Tiffany's condition was that bad or if she had said something to him, but when he saw me, a flicker of guilt appeared in his eyes. I'm sorry, Grace, I left you alone there yesterday. I smiled and shook my head, indicating it was fine, but expression remained grim. After a moment of silence, he hesitated before speaking. Grace, I might have to spend more time with Tiffany for a while. Her emotional state is very unstable right now. If she doesn't see me, she threatens to commit suicide. I rushed back to see you while she was asleep. Just give me some more time to handle all this, okay? He probably knew himself that his request was unreasonable and absurd, so after saying it, he stood there motionless. He didn't dare look at me, his eyes darting around the room. I smiled and nodded. All right, I'll take this time to go out with a friend and clear my head. Contact me once you've sorted everything out. Ethan didn't suspect who the friend I mentioned was, nor did he even ask where I planned to. After hearing my words, he sighed in relief, then Pu let out his phone and transferred a large sum of money to me. Grace, have a good time with your friend and stay safe. No sooner had he finished speaking than he hurried away. I let out a sneer. He truly was shameless, wanting both his first love and his current love. 11. Grace, did you pick up your friend? Yes, I did. Have a great time. Ethan quickly hung up the phone after those 2 sentences, but I could still hear Tiffany's sobbing voice calling his name through the receiver clearly. Julian, who was sitting across from me, had also heard. He sneered, then began to mock me. Grace, your taste in boyfriends is truly terrible. Yes, you're absolutely right. I can't compare to your discerning eye, old man. How about you introduce me to someone next time? Julian rolled his eyes at that, but still didn't forget to insult me. Pathetic. This bickering scene clearly startled Zoe. She blinked her big eyes and quietly asked me what was going on. Earlier today, when Julian video called me to say he was coming back, Zoe happened to be there. After seeing Julian's incredibly handsome face on my phone, Zoe cried and begged to come with me to pick him up at the airport. When I hung up the video call, she even asked me how I could even look at Ethan when I had such a handsome childhood friend. Before I could explain, she covered my mouth. It's okay if you're too shy, I'll take over now. I could finally tell her. My childhood friend was indeed a childhood friend, male, and he liked men. How could there be any sparks between us if we shared the same preference? After hearing my explanation, Zoe was speechless. She clutched her chest, looking utterly wounded. Of course, handsome guys belong to other handsome guys. Fine, I give up with that. Zoe hurried away. She had originally skipped work to help me pick up Julian purely to see how handsome he was in person. I really couldn't understand the world of fangirls. After left, Julian tapped on the table in front of me. Don't space out. Come on, tell me your story with that boyfriend of yours. I distinctly remember that when I was last back, you were telling me with a completely happy face that you wanted to marry him. How did things turn out like this so quickly? I sighed. I hadn't expected things to turn out like this in less than a year either. After hearing my story, Julian uncharacteristically didn't mock me. He was silent for a moment before asking, "So, what are you going to do? Just let them off the hook?" "Definitely not," I answered decisively, then stared at Julian with a fawning smile. I had just come up with an idea, one that would make Ethan experience exactly what I had. Julian grew increasingly uncomfortable under my gaze. Years of shared understanding allowed him to guess my thoughts just by my expression. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "You want me to act with you just to mess with him? My appearance fee is pretty steep, 12. So while Ethan was at the hospital with Tiffany, Julian and I spent our time wandering around. One day we were eating a new restaurant specialty here. The next, we were trying a different diner's offerings. That day, I felt like seeing windmills, so Julian and I went straight to Europe anyway. Ethan had given me more than enough money. It would be a waste not to spend it every day. I checked in at different locations on my social media post. Ethan would comment or like, but he never once asked who I was spending all that time with. He was probably too busy taking care of Tiffany. Completely stretched thin, Ethan called me. He said Tiffany had been discharged from the hospital, but still couldn't be left alone. He asked if Tiffany could temporarily stay at our new home to make it easier for him to take care of her. I smiled and said yes. Just as I was about to hang up, Julian spoke from behind me. "Grace, where did you put my underwear?" I turned my head and saw Julian winking at me. I immediately understood what he meant, so I decisively hung up the phone and turned it off. What I had gone through. It was finally his turn to experience seeing me hang up. Julian curled his lip in disdain. "Looks like I have to step in during crucial moments." I gave him a thumbs up. Right, you're the best." Ethan arrived even faster than I expected the next day. Before I even opened my eyes, I heard frantic banging on the hotel room door. Julian, who was sound asleep on the floor, jolted up, springing into a sitting position when he heard the commotion. Well, he got here fast, so he's not worried about his childhood friend's life or death anymore, Julian grumbled as he quickly gathered his things from the floor, tossing his blanket and pillow onto my bed in a determined effort to make Ethan misunderstand completely. The moment he opened the door, Ethan's fist flew towards him. Julian was prepared, turning his head slightly to dodge it. Julian was a bit taller and sturdier than Ethan, so he held his own in a fight. In no time, Ethan was on the defensive. Ethan grew even angrier, his blows becoming increasingly fierce, fearing would get hurt if the fight continued. I stepped forward and embraced Ethan. Enough, stopped. Julian took the opportunity to kick Ethan in the stomach again. This was a silent understanding we had developed since childhood fights. I'd hold the person, and he'd deliver the finishing blow. I heard Ethan grunt, so I guessed Julian's kick had been pretty forceful. Ethan slowly pulled my hands away, then turned around fuming and demanded, "Grace, this whole time this is the friend you've been hanging out with?" Under his angry gaze, I nodded. "That's right, my friend." Ethan's face darkened further, suppressing his rage. He continued, "Do you think this is appropriate?" The moment he said it, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Ethan, you're with your childhood friend, and isn't that fair?" 13. After hearing my words, Ethan instantly deflated like a punctured balloon, his anger completely dissipating. But how could I let him off the hook? I had waited for this day for far too long. "Ethan, when you and Tiffany were using the excuse of being childhood friends to do all those inappropriate things, why didn't you consider whether it was appropriate? Why did Tiffany dare to threaten you with cutting her wrists? Because she knows she holds a place in your heart, and doing that gets her what she wants besides. Was she really hurt that badly? If she truly had a near-death experience, how would she have the strength to text me provocations? You were with her constantly, did you really? Not no. I pulled out my phone and threw it into his lap. Take a good look at what your childhood friend has been sending me. Ethan took the phone with trembling hands. After a long hesitation, he finally opened the chat. With Tiffany and me ever since Ethan abandoned me that day, Tiffany had been sending me messages, gloating now and then. Actually, my injury isn't serious at all. The cut just looks a bit scary. Ethan personally made me chicken noodle soup today. He said outside food isn't clean. Oh, I told him I'm fine, but he's worried and insists on staying with me. I'm discharged today, moving into your new home. I definitely don't want to live where you two are now. I want the new home to be filled with my presence. In addition, there were all sorts of photos. Ethan exhausted, sleeping beside her hospital bed, Ethan holding her hand, worried, Ethan wearing an apron, cooking for her after she moved into their new home, and even photos of the two of them sharing a bed. I watched Ethan's face grow paler and paler. Finally, when he looked up, his eyes were filled with despair. Grace, please, let me explain. Nothing really happened between us. I don't know what that last photo is about. Maybe she lay next to me while I was asleep. Grace, I really haven't done anything to betray you. Looking at the man I had loved several years for the first time, I found him utterly disgusting enough. Ethan, it's not just about sleeping together or being intimate that counts as betraying me. You betrayed me the moment your emotional scales tipped repeatedly toward her, swinging back and forth between us again and again. Let's break up. Ethan, save yourself some dignity. 14. I hadn't expected Ethan to be so persistent. I had wanted to end things amicably, but he insisted on clinging on. I had barely moved into my new place when he found me. He'd either be waiting at my doorstep or downstairs, and as soon as he saw me, he'd hand me all sorts of things, a bewildering array of items from food to everyday necessities and even toys. I'd throw them away right in front of him, but he wouldn't get angry. He'd just smile and continue. The next day, my patience wore thin, and I finally called Tiffany. When arrived, she was absolutely enraged. She slapped Ethan hard right in front of me and launched into a furious tirade at him. Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip? Didn't you say you'd marry me soon? So why are you here, looking for her now? I quietly stepped back a few paces, afraid the crossfire would hit me for the first time. In front of me, Ethan showed impatience towards Tiffany. Why did you actually believe it? I was just lying. If you hadn't threatened to kill yourself back, then why would I have said those things? I haven't liked you for a long time. Can you stop clinging to me? You're really annoying. Perhaps to prove to me that he really didn't love Tiffany, he said many more hurtful things in front of me. The disgust and impatience in his eyes didn't seem fake. The more Tiffany listened, the darker her face became. Finally, she burst into loud laughter, but it was a maniacal sound that unsettled anyone who heard it. Ethan, stop with your pipe dream. You think you can just discard me after everything we've been through? It's not that easy. You just wait with th. At Tiffany stormed off. While was stunned, I quickly drove away. It looks like I'll have to find somewhere to lay low for a while. So when Julian asked if I was willing to relocate to Europe with him and build a life there, I nodded and agreed without hesitation. Julian truly was my savior. Before long, my friend Zoe, who was back in the States, brought me news about Ethan and Tiffany. One of them died, and the other was injured. The one who survived would have to do hard time once their injuries healed. It turned out that Ethan and Tiffany's involvement wasn't just romantic. It extended to business dealings. In summary, Ethan, to help Tiffany establish herself better in the company, had secretly given her a lot of leeway and engaged in illegal schemes. They had both been constantly pushing the boundaries of legality and had long been tied to each other's fate. Ethan hadn't expected Tiffany to commit such a mutually destructive act in revenge. The day he received news that Tiffany was going to call the police, Ethan frantically drove to intercept her, but Tiffany, in a frenzy, fled the accelerator, vowing to die with Ethan. The final outcome was that Tiffany died, and Ethan was severely injured, but what they had done still came to light, and it was only a matter of time before they faced severe legal punishment. After finished, she asked me happily, Grace, are you happy? The wicked always get. They're just desserts. I nodded, but honestly, I felt no strong emotions. It Felt as if it were someone else's story before hanging up. Zoe lowered her voice and asked me, "How are things with your childhood friend?" I paused slightly. What else could there be? Didn't I tell you? We just share similar interests. Zoe shook her head in disagreement. I don't think so. To do all that for you. Think about it yourself. I secretly thought Zoe was getting it all wrong. I turned my head and saw Julian leaning against the doorframe, smiling at me. But his smile didn't low. Okay, very friendly. Who told you I was gay? Huh. I saw it myself. 15. Julian, was only today that I realized Grace actually thought I was gay. The reason was that she had seen a guy kiss me before. I racked my brain and finally remembered when it was. Can I just explain that I was the one who was kissed? I had no idea that the guy I always thought of as a good friend had different feelings. No wonder Grace's gaze towards me had been odd ever since. It was only after she started dating someone that I realized I liked her. After realizing my feelings, I only felt regret and, of course, sadness. I was the one who met her first, but I've always been quite philosophical about things. As long as she was happy, even if the one making her happy wasn't me. About half a year ago, I vaguely felt something was wrong, although she didn't tell me anything. The disappointment in her eyes couldn't escape me. I thought and finally returned to the States. What if I was just overthinking it? I had to see her doing well with my own eyes to truly feel at ease. The situation was worse than I expected. That man was truly insatiable. Since that was the case, I decided I had to take Grace away. After hearing the news about that awful couple, Grace was very calm. It seemed she had truly moved on. Since she had truly moved on, I decided it was time to collect my appearance fee. So you're really not gay? Grace stared at me with her beautiful eyes, asking in disbelief. No, I'm not. If you don't believe me, I'll prove it to you. Her remaining words were cut short by my kiss. I finally kissed the girl I loved. Finally, I held Grace and whispered softly into her ear, "I told you my appearance fee is very high. You'll have to pay it back with your entire